My guest today on Drifting is Conrad Anker. Conrad's accomplishments as a climber and mountaineer register with some of the greatest physical and mental feats of mankind. He's a mentor to the likes of Jimmy Chen. He's an exceptional athlete and an amazing human being. Please enjoy. Conrad, thanks for taking the time, although time's what we have a lot of all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Are you home by yourself or is the family out in the
I'm with Jenny, so it's just the two of us. And
where are the boys?
Max lives across the street.
Oh, okay.
So we see him, and Sam lives about 4 blocks away, and the youngest is still at college in Bellingham. So we're missing him, but he'll be back here before too long.
He holed up in his apartment or his dorm or what?
Yeah, he's in an apartment, and he we gave him the option to come back as soon as they switched all the classes to online. But he wanted to finish it out, and he was set to graduate June 13th, and kind of more of a special moment for us than it would be for him, as those things often tend to be for parents. So
that's kind of like one group I've been considering quite a bit is like the senior class right now.
Oh, yeah.
Robbed of that social experience at the end of their education journey, that's a tough
especially
knock.
In high school, because they'll never be that way again. They're leaving, and the world is before them. They'll join the workforce or sign up for the military or go to university or go work on the family farm or something like that, and that's completely lost with them now.
Yeah, a lot of them probably didn't even have the time to say goodbye, before sort of quarantine kind of hit and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
it's been 12 years with people in the largest developmental phase of your life, from basically, from a 5 or 6 year old up until a young adult, and then it's kind of strange.
Yeah, and for the parents too. I mean, I remember when our boys, each time they graduated, those group of parents that we got to know as they went through school were friends, and you kind of see everyone off, and a few of them we still remain close with, but there's I think everyone's gonna lose something like that. So
how old is Max?
Max is 31.
Oh.
So and Sam's 27 and Isaac's 23. So
I have a youngest son, Isaac, as well.
Oh, good.
He's 5.
Oh, wonderful. He who smiles.
Yeah.
What a beautiful name.
Tell me what's your protocol? I know you're someone who's likely taking this thing very seriously and abiding to a lot of self-constraint. So
So started out, I had a pretty busy winter schedule. A lot of our work is scheduled in Q3, Q4 with North Face. That's my employer. And then I guided in Antarctica for a month and had a couple ice festivals and some film work that I did. And I was in Norway ice climbing until I was scheduled to fly home the 12th, and then moved it up a day because the flights were canceled. And so I came home and then self-quarantined for 2 weeks right away because I'd been in Europe, and I was, and then
that was when did you start that? Sorry.
Basically the Saturday the 14th. So I went out on Friday evening the 13th with my buddy and our 2 sons, and we went to open range and had a social hour, drank a beer together, and that was the last time I've been to a restaurant. So kind of missed that. But then went into self-quarantine, and then the state went into shelter at home pretty quick.
And are you can you get in the car and drive by yourself to a trailhead, or no deal?
We can go out. So it's interesting. We have once a week, our athlete team from TNF meets up on a Zoom call, and talking to the Italians, they can't even leave their apartment. I mean, it's a 3,000 euro fine if they're outside, and they're all in Bergamo in northern Italy, which is the center of it all. So when we sit here and grouse about things, so we get out. Montana's shelter at home still permits outdoor recreation, but just Sunday, looking at the trailheads, it was completely packed, and the popular places are really packed. And so it's not going there and knowing places to go that are not along those lines. And then, as a climber, not and skier, not getting out and doing those high risk activities is um, kind of important that we don't run the chance of ending up in the hospital. One, because you're going to burden the healthcare system, and then two, it's you're exposing yourself to the coronavirus. So that's kind of keeping that in mind, and so not going out and sharing those things.
Yeah, is there any cases in your county or in Bozeman in the city?
Yeah, our county has more than any other county in the state, and so far the state has 6 confirmed deaths due to coronavirus as of the 13th of April. And yeah, the shelter at home's been pretty good. So a friend of mine and his wife, I know 2 couples um, that were affected by it, and so they've gone through the worst of it. So they had a robust immune system that was with it. But yeah, it's still, yeah, that you can be asymptomatic and still be a disease vector is really makes it hard to follow and to track. And it's yeah, for someone like you that we enjoy being out in the woods and being in nature, and there's a certain reliance that we draw upon that brings us an inner balance. But by the same measure, we see how heavy the human hand is on this planet, and it's just things. I mean, this virus that went from an animal species through a host species to humans, and so that's something that we're aware of, and that we're seeing the effects of it.
Were you somewhere else in the world when the first news hit? Were you in Antarctica when
Yeah,
earlier,
we
like
were.
January?
I think just at the very end of the of 2019, a good friend of mine, David Quammen, wrote a book titled Spillover. It came out about 5-6 years ago, and it's exactly about what we're seeing right now. So he'd studied Zika, H1N1, Ebola, and so knowing what that was. So being pretty aware of it, and being someone that travels, and then also maintaining space with sort of your hygiene and everything like that. I was aware of it, but it wasn't. I mean, we were in Antarctica, and then we came back, went to the trade show in Salt Lake City. Everything was fine. You're in this big room, shaking hands with people and in meetings, and you're sitting across from someone, and all these things that we have taken for granted is what it means to be human and to connect with other people is really that's been taken away from us. And so the long-term effect on our culture is going to be profound, and we just don't know where we're at with it. One of the things that I work with the climbing community is that the inevitable loss that comes from it, and so people are going out on their own volition, and they're injured or they lose their life. And how do we do that? And in a sense, on the macro level, we're going through this survivor's loss and guilt that's associated with a lot of people. And depending if one's empathetic to other humans and is aware of things like that, it has a different effect on it. And where we'll be in a year from now is, and yeah, I think a year ago right now when we met for the first time at the 10th anniversary YETI get together, and we were having a great time and on stage and in an auditorium with 2,000 people, and
No care in the world about it. Yeah.
yeah, and it was like everyone was there, and even though we'll be back to with the herd immunity takes place, or there's a vaccine or something like that, it just won't be the same. And to how we adjust to that is going to be a real challenge.
There's some arguments, and people, I think it's just natural, people having the discussion and comparing it to the flu and such like that, which kills, if I'm correct, somewhere in America around 55 to 60,000 people a year. It's a vaccine preventable disease, but this thing is much different in how it spreads, and the fact that we don't have a vaccine, we don't have a medication that really treats this disease. Have you heard anything from the inside, some of the people that are experts in this field, as to just how different it is from the flu, how much more dangerous it is than other diseases we're familiar with?
Yeah, the mortality rate is higher, so that's that much we know. That you can be an asymptomatic host and still share the disease, and that it's respiratory in nature. So all those sort of come to it, but that the coronavirus itself is something that once it's identified, and the proteins and the scientific makeup of it can then be put to good use. And I'm no expert. Some of the best advice I've heard from this is listening to Bill Gates. And so he's funding numerous laboratories to come up with a cure for it. And his approach to it right now is that they'll have maybe 10 laboratories working from 10 different angles with 10 different solutions to this. And if only one of them comes to pass, then that's a success. But we just don't have any time to waste to say we need to get to this point with what's happening before we advance to the next level of clinical studies. So each of these laboratories is working on a different part of it. And it's a good example of someone that's that he and his wife Melinda with the Gates Foundation have done a really good job of working on malaria in sub-Saharan Africa, as an example, infectious diseases. And so they're being in the correct position for this. But it's my concern is for the people that I meet in my friends in Nepal, my friends in India, in rural areas of China, sub-Saharan Africa, where people live in closer proximity. They don't have the luxuries of we do, of a house and soap. And I mean, our biggest people are like, I don't have enough toilet paper. I need to get more dried beans. And we can self-quarantine pretty well. But when you think about the challenges India is going through right now, where they said, okay, we're in lockdown, all the migrant employees, workers then had to walk home for 170 miles or something like that, big distances. And it's
really just no access to medical care, even a little bit. Like they've probably toughed it through having the cold or the flu before without a notion of even going to a medical facility and being checked for something.
Yeah. And it's and until we get testing and tracking done, it's we have to be here. And so it's but yeah, I think about all of our fellow YETI ambassadors in food and beverage work, and my sister and brother each have a restaurant in rural California. They've been closed up, and they ran through the inventory they had to feed their staff. Their people they don't have any money to pay them. It's a real tough go, and they depend on tourist season. It's on the way into Yosemite, so they require that those customers to come through. But moreover, it's the community. It's the locals that live in Big Oak Flat and Groveland, little dinky towns, and the older people that come there for their nutrition. They might eat there 2-3 times a week, and they come and sit there for 2 hours and they say hi to their friends. And for this social isolation, and knowing that a bunch of these locals are single nutrition is the effect on
Hey,
the
Conrad, there was a little blip in connectivity. Can you start just that last 10 seconds again?
Yeah, it kind of came
out.
but the the restaurant business, it's going to be a real challenge for them to come back from this. And so it's a cash in, cash out type of business. And then all the suppliers, the food that they purchase, and and we realize how important it is. And at our own household here, we have a tradition of Sunday night meals, and that's from when the kids were young. And it was never kind of like the full school night, so it was a little bit flexible, but we would cook dinner and then invite friends over and set the table and really have a nice sit down meal, spend 4 hours going in food prep and setting the table and just really making it something special for the kids. And it was always an integral part in who do we have over for our Sunday evening dinner. And it's like, wow, Jenny and I, we're going to have string beans and some salad and catch up on the news and see what the streaming services has, or go reading, or it's just that you still see your neighbors, but you're 6-10 feet away and you're saying hello to them, and those things that you want to connect with them. And it'll be a different world once all this blows over.
You mentioned something I want to bring up, because it's my greatest fear for humanity, and as it applies to one another and also to the natural world around us. And that's like the presence of empathy, which I believe, in my heart, I believe you learn as a child. And if you didn't pick it up, then I think that it takes a pretty extreme moment or event in your life that either drives empathy into you or creates even a greater lack of.
Yeah.
And to think about the absence of a handshake in our future, or getting a hug from a friend, or this like you said it, we're all kind of clicking into a survival mode, which if you see someone coughing, you're not running over to help them, pat them on the back, make sure they're not choking on something. You're sort of putting your jacket over your face and running in the opposite direction. Can you tell me, from your most optimistic view of how we will benefit as a species from this, and then also on the flip side, from your most pessimistic, fearful view of the future after the coronavirus, where you think that like the biggest negatives might lead the human race?
Well, beginning with the empathy part of the question, it's something that I've learned through time in the mountains and being outdoors, and it's self-imposed. I mean, no one's saying, "Oh, you got to go climb these mountains and live in a portaledge and suffer and go through all that stuff." I do it because I'm seeking adventure, and the day-to-day requirements of my existence, shelter, food, clothes, all that is taken care of. So it's sort of my path to self-actualization. But experiencing hardship through your own volition brings empathy to people that are less fortunate. And that's why a lot of these famous, not famous, but culturally across all cultures, there's these rites of passage where you go out and you experience hardship. And then through that prism of hardship, you come back and you understand what it means to be human. And for instance, Theodore Roosevelt, his time that he spent in the Western United States was helped frame who he was as a leader, not just a son of wealth from New York City, but rather he had that experience that made him more aware of people that are less fortunate. And that's been a real key part of what we tried to impart with our children, Jennifer and I, that there are many people that are less fortunate than we are. And by traveling and seeing people and understanding that not everyone lives the life that we do here in the United States, and particularly if you live a comfortable existence here in the United States, we're very fortunate for that. And that it's and some people, to have that care for other people is it's innate. It's part of it is a learned behavior from parents that help you out with that. But and for some people it's absent. They're like, well, this is this is mine. I'm not going to share with what I have, and I'm going to protect. So there's two ways that humans can react to the challenges that we're currently facing. One is that you will become more empathetic and you will do what you can to help other people out, bring as much goodness to as many people. And the health practitioners are at the front line of that. They signed up to be in that profession because they believed in doing well and helping people out. And that was their guiding principle, that they wanted to do it. Their characters spoke to them. They said, I need to help people out. And they didn't expect that they would be in as dire a situation as they are due to the working environment, but they're still there with to help out other people. And then there's other people that are like, well, it's going to affect someone else than me. I'm going to take what I have and keep mine and keep other people out. And it's just sort of this survivalist of like a wolf pack or something like that. And we're very cognizant people. I mean, we have these massive brains up here that have given us great insight into life and engineering and art and creativity. And within that, there's also empathy and understanding for other humans. And that we come through this, that people see an opportunity to extend a hand and to help out and to realize people that are less fortunate, that in the process of helping them out, you enrich your own life.
And so an extension of that, like, what do you think is the best thing optimistically that will occur and affect the human race as a result of this moment we're in?
Well, what we're facing is not an enemy that is based on an ideology or ethnicity or class or anything like that. It's a microscopic entity, being, that's goal in life is replication and survival. It's doing the same thing that we are as a human species, and why we're at 7.4 billion people is we just want to multiply, and it's sort of programmed into our DNA. And it's probably the same thing with this virus, and it's just that much more efficient at doing it, and it makes it a real challenge. That
Good times for that little critter.
Yeah, it's yeah, and it doesn't. There's no morality. There's no change in that. I mean, we idolize wolves because they're here in Montana, and I enjoy watching them, and you know the strength of the wolf pack and all this and that. But if you're no longer part of contributing to that pack, I mean, you get torn asunder. You're pushed out, and it's a very dog eat dog world, to use that phrase. And that we as humans we're above that, and that we have a dedication to other humans and to doing well. And in that sense, in the same way that I look at addressing climate change and population, that as the United States, we are this beacon of democracy. We have the world's best education system, as measuring PhDs awarded and patents awarded to university systems. Incredibly creative. We have this entrepreneurial spirit. We're independent minded. We're kind of iconoclasts in a sense, but we're this one nation where anyone can be a citizen. We have the economic and religious refugees of the world that came to the United States to make this a better country and a better world. And there's a tremendous amount of work that we can do on it, and our history is anything but perfect, and to recognize that. But we still have this opportunity to be leaders on a global scale, and that we can pull that in, and that's by being part of something, being part of our nation, being identifying what it means to be a citizen and doing your part and not expecting, oh, I got a handout or something like that. But it's like, yeah, put your shoulder to the wheel and do something for your fellow humans. And that if there is a solution to this over time, that a vaccine that comes from it, that if it's, that it won't just be one laboratory in one small place, it's going to be all across the planet, from China to Switzerland to everywhere, South Africa, United States, Mexico, Canada, all of the nations really will pull together to work together. And that if it teaches us anything, is that we're all human, and to take away the boundaries of borders and the how we view each other as humans in sort of that protective way, that that we're all at risk of this.
I really do hope that as you just said it, that global effort will slice through the divisive political rhetoric that has been so damaging to our culture in America.
Yeah.
For us to see, because I mean, you've traveled enough and you have enough loved ones and friends and brothers and sisters around the globe to realize that most human beings are just that, just good-hearted people that care. And that our struggle is exactly the same, that we're sitting on the greatest wealth, the greatest resources, the greatest opportunity of any country in the world. And for us to be hoarding, water and plastic and acting so foolishly right now. I hope that when it's said and done, that those who purchased every water bottle on the shelf still have 90% of it left over in the garage and can look at that massive pile of waste and say, God, that was unnecessary. I'm not going to do that again.
Well, the saying is that the difference between an enemy and a friend is getting to know them, a handshake, and once you get to know someone and they're in person, then it's like, oh yeah, they're a good person, and there's and when you see that with people, there's from afar, there might be some trepidation, and there might be deep-seated fear that's rooted in anxiety that would prevent you from being open and being friendly with that person. But then once you sit down with them and you realize, yeah, it's the same thing. You want to care for your mother. You want to see how your niece is doing in school. We all have these human connections, and that the construct of society and we take that away, and we relate to one human at a time. You always find that you're friends with him. If we can embody that way, and if that's the slight silver lining of this crisis that we're in, it gives us something to look forward to.
I agree 100%. I was kind of running through just a brief history of mankind from what little I know and understand about it, but from being one of the most physically vulnerable species on the planet, except for the frontal lobe, which you mentioned, and our ability to create and to be conscious of every action, go from early hunter-gatherers, or even take the Hadza of Tanzania, who are, I think, a tribe of around 1,300 people, the last group of hunter-gatherers on the world that spend their entire existence every day foraging for edible plants and hunting with very simplistic bows and arrows. A very happy people, very healthy people with zero medicine live into their upper 60s, 70s, no immunization. They have no heart disease, no obesity, no diabetes. For an American who's used to the pleasures, we know that might be a pretty rough existence. But somewhere between, like the creation of industrialized agriculture and our ability to create, mass stockpiles of rich carbohydrates, and then fast forward to today, where a giant part of our population exists on hydrogenated, oil-rich, salty, and corn syrupy foods that and live sedentary lives on the couch. And that's about as worse off as a human being could be, I think, from a happiness level, an experience level, a health level. but what is the balance between us and the Hadza? And that's kind of where I hope this thing leaves us, where we've got to work a little bit for everything we attain, but that everything's not a total struggle at the same time. We have so much to lose, but losing some of it is probably the sweet spot. And does that make any sense? Am I just been cooped up too long?
No, that makes sense. Yeah, there's they've done some interesting studies. The amount of time that is spent towards taking care of the basic needs of shelter, food, and clothing, and then how much time do you have for other things in life? And a lot of these simple cultures, yeah, they might have older historical ones that they might have had a shorter lifespan, but they had a good they had a good existence. They were communal, and there was the family structure was a bit bigger. There was more people living together and caring for each other, and that is if we can come back to that and to see humans as not as individuals united by a flag, but humans as humans, and that we're all born here, and that there's the most that we can do to help other people out really makes it special.
Breaking away a little bit from our current predicament, backing up into your early life, California, right? From an outdoors family, you were taught respect for nature and the outdoors at a young age, were you not?
Yeah, we Central California, Tuolumne County, and so my grandmother and grandfather had a little restaurant, and they summertime vacations, we'd always get out in the backcountry and go from Highway 108 to Highway 120 and either go north or south. And we just go on that with some mules. And it was, but my grandfather was really an important person in my life. He lived through the Great Depression. My father was born in 28. And so that was what he had experienced. And he was always like, oh, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be easy. And, when he eventually passed away, but it was like coffee cans full of rubber bands and folded up tin foil. he was like, there was always sort of like living the level of excess that we're kind of accustomed to is really foreign to him. So it was definitely got to be careful. You don't know how good you have it. And then layering onto that, my mother, she was basically grew up outside of Dresden in East Germany. And my father was a soldier. And so he turned 18 in 1946. And so after the war, he met her there in Germany and then brought her back to the United States. And that was how I got my start. But for her, she was an immigrant, and to just seeing how people treated her because she had an accent, and I mean, she was Caucasian, she's white, so it wasn't, and it made me understand what it's like to be a person that like my Black friends, my Hispanic friends, that when someone like myself is like, oh, that's all, racism's done with. We've already moved on for that. But if you see it from their perspective and you understand that, and so that little bit of my mother's view of what it was like being from Germany and seeing how people treated her, and so I was like, okay, that was a good formative lesson to learn things.
How did you, in your early adulthood, what were your potential paths, and how did you focus in on being a mountaineer?
Oh yeah, they're
Did you try a little bit in the restaurant and like that didn't?
Yeah, I mean,
the grand folks, and then like I'm getting out of here.
Yeah, I mean, I'd always picked up work and jobs with that, and it was I liked cutting firewood. It was you had the chainsaw, and it's like scary, and you get to drive the truck, and there's all that sort of that high energy, high risk type of activity appeals to me. That I'm I'm a hyperactive person. I was a hyperactive kid, and growing up, it was always like, oh no, he's going a little bit crazy, and what's going on there? But if I could find a place to take care of it, and that was climbing. So when you get up off the deck, then all of a sudden you can't make a mistake. You have to focus on the moment. You have to be there, and that was sort of what saved me from what I was doing. But it was probably about age 14, we were coming out of the mountains on one of our backpack trips. And so we'd have a mule or two with us and then backpacks. And so our family was 4 kids and 2 parents. And so we'd be this troop of 6 coming out of the mountains. And that last day where everything's kind of come together, you're packing your pack and you're just feeling like this is it. And there was this moment, this epiphany that was like, I'm at my happiest moment out here in the woods, and that whatever I do, I can focus my life on being outdoors and spending meaningful time with people or friends or myself out here. And that was kind of it. That was the prism. So whatever it took for me to get through life and to see it was definitely, that was a key part of it. So whatever I could do to stay outdoors was that key part.
What was your first occupational sort of experience where you're like, I can really do this and make a living and lead expeditions or be on expeditions on my own and get money, sponsorship,
Yeah.
survive climate mountains?
Yeah, when I went to school at University of Utah, and I worked at Bar Mountaineering, which was like a little gear shop. And Roy Bar was from the 10th Mountain Division and kind of founded that, and that was my introduction into the North Face. And so I did that kind of work, and then it really wasn't like I was people were paying me to go climbing. I mean, the first bunch of trips all the way up until about 93, 94, I worked as a carpenter, and I loved that kind of work. And I'd work and I'd save up money, and then I'd go on a vacation, go on a climbing expedition, do something like that. And then starting in about 93, I was able to bring more of that into my life. And I fortunate to be able to work in the outdoor business, and it's and sharing, being a storyteller for it more than anything, because we're not really, I mean, what you do, JT, doesn't really, there's not like you don't win, right? You do it because it's part of who you are, what makes you feel good. It's the same thing with mountain climbing. You're out there and it's an experiential type of thing. And if you can come back and share that story with people, then you have an understanding of maybe sharing that and being helpful with people, and like, yeah, this is a good place to be. And that was and so it's always been this, you have to talk about your stories, you have to have a bit of self-promotion built into it, you work with product, you bring together a whole variety of different views, and kind of finding that in a way that is meaningful is really a key part to it.
You ended up like leading the mountaineering division for North Face for quite many years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Almost 20 years. What was that role?
Yeah, so as the athlete team captain, so we have a variety of athletes from skiing, snowboarding, ski mountaineering, running, rock climbing, alpine climbing, and then sort of bringing the team together and working with it. And then Hillary Nelson is now the team captain, and passing the baton on, and in the process codifying it and helping her become the leader. So it was it was a meaningful thing, but mostly it's
that was a couple of years ago that you passed that on, right?
Yeah, and it was neat to do that. Always keep in mind, plan your transitions or they will plan them for you. So, whether you're skiing or you're
That's kind of an eye opener for me, real quick.
Yeah.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
About that.
I mean, if you think about it, you always see things coming, and they're, I mean, that transition, say if you're skiing and you're on soft snow and it's going to be icy there, you have to understand that plan transition and so that's like the physical sense. But in life, yeah, understanding those things. And it
Would you
was
say
time.
that, would you say that 50 is the onset of starting to plan that?
Yeah, probably so. I mean, I, I should have listened to myself at age 49. I was like, yeah, I had a really good year and I should have been, dude, you got it, coast, but I was still hungry. And then I went out and in 2016 tried for the second time to climb this peak, Lunagri, with the late David Lama, and suffered a heart attack. And that was like, boom, right there, get my ass handed to me. And so, and what David was 26. I mean, he's the same age as our sons. And, what am I doing here? Trying to climb these 7,000-meter granite spires, which is what I'd chosen to do. And it was.
Was that totally self-induced, not a genetic disposition to it, not a dietary disposition, 100% altitude and strain on your interior organs? Was that a
Yeah, it's,
Conrad?
yeah, well, I didn't have a history of heart issues within my family. It could be related to diet. But I think that what happened was in 2012, I had climbed Everest without supplemental oxygen and had really hammered my body. I had an O2 saturation, which is how much of oxygen you have in your blood, of 52%. So in the hospital, they put you on supplemental oxygen. So I was fortunate to get through with that. But I think somewhere in the process of that, and this is just my own, what I think happened to me, that I'd torn something in my left anterior artery, and that then had a plaque buildup, and then triggered by altitude and cold and nervousness of being on that climb that day, it dislodged and then blocked the lower part of my left anterior descending. And so effected a self-rescue, rappelled off the climb, and then went down through the ice fall. And 9 hours from onset, I was fortunate there was a cardiologist in Kathmandu that was there that day, and he performed an angioplasty. So kind of went in right through there. There's a little micro scar, and took some filament and pulled the obstruction out, and then went back in and used a balloon to inflate it with a stent. And that was, yeah.
Most people have that same heart attack. They're like dead on their carpet before the ambulance gets there, so.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it's over 90 minutes, then it's, yeah.
But you also have the physical stamina to self-rescue from a remote mountainous region. That's pretty.
Yeah. It was
intense, buddy. Wow.
Yeah. It was a slow conversation with the recycler. So.
And not to dwell on it, but my father died at 50 from a heart attack. 52, excuse me. His father died at 52, also from the same thing. What's
Wow.
the sensation? What does it feel like when it happens? Is it undeniable?
Yeah, people were like, "Oh, how did you know you're having a heart attack?" And it's like, well, like the most of it, you see it that you go to the doctor's office. It's like, do you have blue lips and no feeling in your left hand? There are a couple markers for that, but to me, it was just acute pain in my heart. And you've probably had a Charlie horse or like a constriction knot in your leg, and you're like, "Oh, it just hurts," and it pulls tight or something like that. But it was that compounded by a whole bunch, and it's
in your chest, in your heart,
in my chest, kind of like a elephant standing on it. It was just intense, sharp, radiating pain, and it was because my left interior was blocked, and so that lower. They break it up into 3 sections, and then each of those sections has 4 quadrants. So there's 12 parts of that, what they measure. And so that the lower part of that is dormant in hibernation. It hasn't come back out, so I'm compensating for it in other ways. But I do hope that you check in with medical professionals, and I have got great friends. So if you want someone to,
in that regard. As a guide, like I've got 5 or 6 doctors on speed dial.
Yeah.
I live quite a different lifestyle than they did. I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's still something to be mindful of, and it's But what's interesting, just kind of on a side note, is that the amount of emergencies that people are experiencing in this last month of since the COVID-19 crisis has emerged, there's fewer heart attacks, there's fewer strokes, there's less crime, there's less automobile accidents, and the air is cleaner, the rivers are cleaner. I mean, it's sort of
Oceans are getting a break. Yeah.
yeah, and so yeah, it was just this nonstop push on humanity, and it was always the pestilence and plague. I mean, it's from going back in history, they've always talked about when it is going to happen, how's it going to happen, and then are we prepared for it?
A lot of people have looked at you in times of intense survival moments, like under your own volition, as you described. Well, what is leadership to you? What separates a leader in that moment from someone who needs to be led? What does leadership mean to you, and how did you come about having that quality in such an exceptional way?
Yeah. One, from my own standpoint, and it's not like I've got a leadership books and I'm studying it or anything like that. I think leaders, one that comes it comes naturally to them. Someone that's charismatic has that an effect on other people. That by being empathetic, and vulnerable, you have trust from them, so they then trust you with that, and then leading by example. So getting out there and as Shackleton did, he scrubbed the floor and he got in there. And Shackleton, when things were, he's been referred to as a great leader, but when things were in dire straits, he was a great leader. But day-to-day life, he wasn't exceptional. He had to be forced into that moment of hardship. And I think that's within all humans, that when the chips are down and we're struggling, that good leaders are going to come out from the woodwork. They'll be there and they will lead with it. And whether it's with your family, which is the closest unit you have, and then onto your community, your where you live, and larger and onto the nation with that. But a lot of it is having calm under pressure and not sort of, if people look up to you, they're like, yeah, okay, we got this. Having a little bit like in the Meru film, they're like, oh yeah, you're chuckling even though the portal edge broke. What are we going to do now? And so people are like, oh, what lessons can we learn from that?
Feeling that calm through experience and being selfless in times of need.
Yeah. And in the situation we're looking at right now, one is how you've handled adversity in the past. Do you have an optimistic outview with that? Do you understand the severity of the crisis and the tools you have at your disposal to find a solution to it, to find a cure to it, to marshal those resources? And then the third one is, do they have trust in you? And those three, they're really kind of interwoven to all of them, and that that people trust you as a leader is a really key part to it. And a lot of where we are in, for instance, the financial system. I mean, to me, it's so giant and huge, and it's built on trust. And so the banks, they look like they're trustworthy. They're solid, and there's big vaults in there, and that we would put money in there. But for the most part, it's kind of like these 16 digits with an expiration code. They're like, oh yeah. Every Thursday night, the little bank account goes, and then you get more little zeros and ones, and it's and still having cash, but maybe we're going to come more to a barter society. Anyways, I went down a rabbit hole.
That's all right, buddy. You're free to do so. In the final ascent on the successful 08 ascent of Meru, in the movie, after the fact, Renan recaps a moment of a portion of that final climb that you had to do, and he said it was one of the most extraordinary feats that he's ever witnessed, and only Conrad could have done that for us. Like, what exactly did he refer to for a non-climber in the movie, which was just one of the most compelling films I've ever watched, by the way? What what was that section all about that got you guys to the top that you had to complete?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and hats off to Renan and Jimmy for being the teammates on that, and the success, and to Chai for helping create that film. Because if they hadn't have done that, it would have been just 5 pages in an obscure mountaineering journal with a couple pictures, and something that it's reached a broader audience has really been meaningful on that. And the pitch that that Renan was talking about was this ice mixed pitch it was sort of a key point that we had to get through to get up higher on it. And it was in 2008 I led that pitch, came back in 2011 I led it again, and it was
sorry, oh wait, was the failed attempt 11?
yeah,
my bad.
and then came back and summited, and that was it was I mean I was like, oh man, I'm gripped, and I don't want to have to go back up there again. It might not have good gear, it's loose, and it's just a foreboding section of cliff, and you had to get around it. So I was thinking, well, I might go left and find a different variation on it, but it was it was Renan being very generous with it, and that within the team I was the more of the ice climber, so that was my hat to wear that day.
Couple of accomplishments that I think are pretty extraordinary. You were asked to go find a climber who had disappeared long ago on Everest in the 20s, George Mallory.
Yeah.
How did that feel to be asked to be on that expedition?
Yeah, that was 21 years ago this spring. So it's time has moved on, but yeah, it was a very humbling moment that day on the 1st of May, 1999, to come across the body of someone that I'd looked up to, who had perished 75 years earlier on Everest. And it was everything we do today is someone that's been there before us has done something that has added to where we are. So we have this is a paperweight, but it looks like a mountain. But we have like a ball of knowledge, and we add to that, and then we make it the best we can, and then we give it to the next generation. And so the generations that came after George Mallory, the 1930s expeditions, the eventual ascent in 1953 by Tenzing Norgay and Sir Edmund Hillary, and then the 60s, 70s, the 80s. And then when I came into it in the 90s, each generation added to the knowledge of what climbing was, and then allowed people to be there. So figuratively, you're standing on the shoulders of those that came before you, and they put their shoulder there for you to help out with. And that may we have that same look and insight going forward into that what we're doing today, that future generations will benefit from it.
And how did you guys know kind of whereabouts to try to find him?
Great question. In 1975, the Chinese had a large expedition, and they were there. And then 1980, China opened up the mountain to Western climbers, including Japan and Korea. I'll include both of those as a very strong mountaineering culture in both those nations. And there was a Japanese climber, so Wang Haobao, the Chinese climber, wrote in the snow, "English dead," to Hasegawa, the Japanese climber, and then that news came out in mountaineering journals. And so there was knowledge that there was an English dead that was on the mountain at that point, and that he was there in that he had it remained with it. And so that was the question was, could George Mallory and Sandy Ertman have climbed Everest 29 years before Tenzing Norgay and Sir Edmund Hillary did in 1953? And so that was always the question, and where might they be? And so it was it was a real unknown going up there and being part of that. So
Did y'all
very
have to
humbling
dig
and
him up?
great respect for my friends that
Did
helped me
you
out.
guys have to like kind of dig him up, or was he uncovered and visible?
He was uncovered and frozen into the ice. So
Uh,
probably seasonally that on a high snow year that there would be covered in snow, and then on a low snow year exposed. So, but having frozen into place on the mountain, so
wow.
it's doesn't get above freezing, so bodies don't decompose, and the the bodies of climbers that are left on the mountain are a food source for ravens, corvids. So they come up and give the deceased a sky burial. So it's but it's if you are in that game, in that arena, you need to make peace with death and your own mortality. And I think that's something that is a little bit lost in our culture and society. We think back 200 years ago to when the pioneers were in the United States, and even moreover the native indigenous cultures that were here, what existence was, where childbirth was very risky and a high mortality rate. Infants not making it through the first few years in that, and then when accidents happened, there wasn't the way to patch them up and heal them that we've become good at, which is all that was learned from war. We became better at emergency room techniques and procedures after the Vietnam War because they were attending to people that were injured in a vast way. But we still, it's not like this coming to understand our own mortality and death. And so a lot of times it's trivialized in movies. I mean, you watch a movie and it'll be like, they get shot 25 times and there's, it no longer has meaning because it's been made into entertainment. And so when you do see that, and it's sort of it gives you a greater appreciation, because for a lot of us, it's like our grandparents, we're just like, okay, we're going to put them in the rest home or something like that. And it was a little bit different. And for you, having lost your grandfather and your father to a coronary incident, there was this moment where you had to, like, it was before and after, and then you went through that, and that our connection together, there was that understanding of being through a trying experience, that when you have experienced death, a near death experience on yourself or someone that's close to you, the simple things in life, from a glass of water to friendship, are much more, that is what is meaningful to you. It's not a snazzy car or something like that. It's like human interaction, because you've seen what it's like without it.
Everything's a blessing when you allow yourself to learn from it and improve from it. So, hey, what's up with this? You guys opened up a climbing center. Is Kumbu the correct
Yep. The
pronunciation?
Kumbu. Yep.
There's like a new, like, totally self-sufficient sort of structure allowing like that in Nepal for the Sherpa to learn techniques and things like that.
Yeah.
The school's been around for like 15 years or more, but now they have a brand new sort of facility through the Alex Lowe Charitable Foundation.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Complete that. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the Kumbu Climbing Center, and Jennifer and I started this in 2003, and it was with a lot of the Sherpa that I was working with on the Mallory trip. So I realized that the Mallory expedition was integral to where I am in my career. And I went from being a technical climber to being aware to more people. So, but in a way to help out with the people that were there, that were with me, the Sherpa people, that in realizing that they didn't have the level of training that I had before I went over there. And then the manner in that I learned to climb was because it was fun. It was my avocation, and it's what I wanted to do, and it created a sense of happiness. And and well-being. And that was always the that you will be a better climber or a better fisher person or a better artist if you love to do it, and know not that you're being forced to do it. And so by having that as a way to come with it and to learn with it. So, and then we, with the help of the Montana State University and input from our Sherbrooke friends in the village of Fort Say, coming up with a design that would then house the building. So giving the program more permanence than what it has been, because we were basically teaching the classes in tea houses and lodges. And so there's a library now, there's a training system there, there's a spot for equipment to be checked out and to be brought back in. It's kind of a really neat.
What a great source of pride for those amazing folks over there.
Yeah, and for this one village, there wasn't a community center. I mean, there's all these individual houses, and now that there's, so from the youngsters that are playing on the bouldering wall to the people that are in the elderly that come and sit by the fireplace and visit with each other. It's something that.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, it's been a great part of it. And having climbed in the Himalayas since 1988, the time that I've been over there has really influenced who I am as a person. And that when I went there, it was like, oh, I'm going to go climbing. This journey is going to be about myself, and just be like, how cool am I? I've climbed some mountain and come back and bask in the glory and tell your friends and perfect the humble brag. But it was like, I came away from those first expeditions with a greater respect for the people that live there. And for them, many of the mountains are deities. There's no sense in needing to go climb them. I mean, life is as difficult as it is, and there's no need to do it. And but within that same transformation of when I was first there, and the people were like, "There's no need to go climbing." The second, third generation, and fourth generation of the youngsters that are climbing in the mountains, they're now doing it for many of the same reasons that you and I might go out for recreation, which is it provides rejuvenation. It provides a break from life. It's what we do. We work so that we can go out and enjoy ourselves. And that is what living is. And whatever someone finds that passion in life is, and it doesn't matter to me whether, if you're playing chess or doing art or ballet or climbing, skeet shooting, whatever, being the best pit master, whatever makes you happy and you do well with that and perfect it to the best you can, then that's the beauty of life, is finding your calling and doing the best you can with it.
I agree 100%. So last couple of things, man. Your son Max across the street.
Yep. Yeah.
The film, right? About
Yeah.
His biological father, your good friend Alex.
Yeah.
And the story of you losing him and then finding him, marrying his mom and becoming his father. That's, I think, such a beautiful, I mean, I'm so glad you didn't go away, and that you're there for those people, and that they're now your family, and that it's one entity. I think that it's the best outcome that could have possibly happened, and I'm sure they all agree. But how is this discovery, this process for him? Are you excited? Is it rehashing the painful memory of what happened, or is it a healthy and sort of cathartic experience for him to go through this process?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and I appreciate that insight. And for as a quick paper thin overview here for those of you listening and that might not know about it, but October 5th, 1999, I was on an expedition in Tibet on Shishapangma, and David Bridges, Alex Lowe, and I were walking on a glacier on an acclimatization day when a large ice avalanche came and took the lives of David and Alex. And then 18 months later, his widow Jennifer and I were married, and then I subsequently adopted the three boys. Max, Sam, and Isaac of Alex. And so that's sort of the foundation of this story. And the title of the film is Torn. And I guess the understanding of it is that love heals. So we you always put love into the equation, and people do well with it. But the process of going through the film has been good for the family. There's I mean, it's going to come out here. We don't know how theaters are going to be, and I mean, it's really unknown where it's going to be. But a lot of respect and gratitude to Max for taking this challenge on, and that for someone that to tell our story was someone that it was our son, and that it was through his view, and that's having it be autobiographical of Max's life and where we are. And yeah, life isn't easy. Like all of us, we face challenges from within it. And when it makes it out to viewers, I'll let them. I've seen it a bunch of times getting to where it is now, and now I'm not going to look at it again until it's done, because picture lock has happened. Picture lock is when they get everything squared away, and then it's sort of like,
cool. It's coming. Sweet.
Yeah, the frame is done, and now they're the sound and graphics and things like that. So it's really kind of working on that part. It's kind of a but yeah, it'll be, hopefully there's something that's meaningful in it, and sort of yeah, you never know where life will take you.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about theaters being closed. I've watched more movies in the last week or two on the internet than I've seen the rest of my whole life.
Yeah, we're plugging into, there's yeah, you realize how much we how the depth that movies and the cinema arts share with us. And it's such a, I mean, even though we're two-dimensional here, and if it was just a standard podcast without visuals, there's so much more that goes on to the conversation, and the empathy that's within your eyes. And my little paperweight of a mountain, using this as a prop. You are listening to it. It's a paperweight shaped like a mountain, and carved onto one side there's a little heart. So it sits on my desk.
Conrad, man, when the idea and possibility to do these podcasts remotely in this particular sort of situation we're in, the first person that came to mind in terms of perspective in our community that I could lean on for myself to gain strength and to pass along to the listeners, you were it, man. So thank you so much for sharing your afternoon with us.
Yeah, and yeah, this is, I mean, we were scheduled to meet in Austin this week, and then I was going to fly to New York City, and there was going to be the United States Olympic climbing team, the big launch and the send-off, and to support those young athletes. And Tokyo Olympics were canceled, and so it was the world has vastly changed. But we have this communication, and physical distancing doesn't mean social isolation. Reach out to people, say hello to them. And as I hike around and I travel on the trails and I'm here, I take the extra effort to be like, hey, how are you doing? Are you doing good? And it's interesting because some people I encounter are they're more reserved, and they're a little bit more fearful, or they're like, don't let your dog get close to me, or I'm keeping my dog away, and I'm trying to be mindful of it. And that at the end of the day, we realize we're all in this together, and that staying at home is staying safe. And that, once we give the scientists time to work on a vaccine that's going to benefit all of humans, that we use this time to be introspective, to do creative things with the house, and to let go of the prejudice and the anger and the resentment and the grudges. I mean, if any time, it's a time to let go of them. Let go of them now, because when you hold those things, the only person you're hurting is yourself. You're the one that's eating it up, because the other person isn't even there. So if you're that, yeah. So make peace with your enemies at this time.
Agreed, man. I'll be thinking about the snow melting up there
Yeah.
flowing in the river past me into the Gulf where I'm at. So
There we go. We'll stay connected on it, and we'll yeah. It's just we got to get together, and so yeah, always yeah. Till our paths cross again. All the best to you and everyone that's out there.
you too, Nico. Hey, thanks so much, Conrad.
All right, take care, JD.
We'll talk to you soon, buddy.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Sweet, we got it.
Got it. That was great.
Yeah, so they edited up a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think there's much to edit out. It's supposed to
Okay.
be right about an hour, and we're like 8 minutes past that. But we had
Yeah.
a little bit of getting started and getting it flowing.
Yeah.
My wife left, so I think it was superb.
Yeah, there'll be yeah, having it be like the transmission hitch was, I mean, I think those are all like,
Oh, we didn't miss a bump there. You picked it right back up where it started with restaurants and stuff.
Yeah. Well, are you in Austin? Are you where are you at?
I in Austin,
Yeah.
Austin right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of like I feel I live in Rockport, Texas, which is on the Gulf Coast near Corpus Christi.
Yeah.
But I've spent a lot of time in Austin. My wife and my 2 boys spend most of their time in Austin at our house here. And since I've been back in Austin, I wrapped up the trips I had about 2 weeks ago and chartering on the Gulf Coast fly fishing trips, and came up to them. And I feel a lot less sort of safe here, to be honest with you, than where I was. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
There's some country places I could go. And so I just I've got a bottle of alcohol and a spray bottle in my car. I have no real reason to go inside a convenience store.
Yeah.
I feel like the gas pump and inside the grocery store are the 2 most vulnerable places.
Yeah.
I'm super blessed. I mean, I've got a lot of access to hunting. We've got some invasive animals in Texas, like axis deer and feral hogs,
Yeah.
which my freezer is stacked with, along with the few fish that I tend to keep. And so
Yeah.
I kind of have an outdoor grocery store, and I'm friends with gardens. I have my own garden. So I mean, I couldn't be more fortunate. And so I think messages like this, between you and I, Conrad, just the political nature of this, especially being in the South, I feel the hatred and some of the racism really kind of coming back under current leadership, and just fear and ignorance. And there's no way to combat it other than to have logical conversations like this, and hope that through a platform like YETI that services a broad demographic, that people will stop for a second and listen, and maybe be inspired to open up and be less fearful, less judgmental, and more accepting of other people. I don't know. Sometimes I want to get out on the ledge and just scream at the top of my lungs, but it never does any good. And so, I've got that anger in reverse, not towards the pandemic or where it originated or who might have it, but towards the people I think that are just not allowing themselves to see clearly what the true situation is, and letting fear and ignorance drive their behavior. But I don't know. I'm thankful to have no one I really know or am close to has had it or died from it. I kind of almost wish I would just get it.
Yeah, and then you have the immunity to it.
Yeah.
So
I don't think it would take me out. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But I'd almost like to go through it. I think this thing's going to be around with cycles like the cold and the flu for the rest of human existence, potentially.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think it's going to be eradicated. And I think eventually they're saying like 80% of people alive right now will eventually have it.
Yeah.
So bring it on while I'm still somewhat young and healthy.
Yeah. You need to be mindful of your kids and where that's all at. And so let's see. Well, cool. Let's let me know when this comes out, and I'm sure Jessica and Joe will follow up with so we get to
if you want to see a version of it, before they're very open to all that. You have any, I don't think there's anything you said that could be viewed with any negativity, but if you want to have a run at it.
No, I think it's good. I mean, I'm comfortable with the conversation and that it's a conversation. And so conversational tics that we might have where we pause or say, or that's all part of it. And it started out just like really low key and we're like, well, what's going on? And then we got into some of the deeper thoughts there. And
those are things I wanted to talk to you about in a podcast anyway, in a perfect world, more about your early career and how you were inspired to do what you do. And especially as a leader, how well you're respected and where that came from. It was an interesting point about your dad and what he went through. And we always talk about how exceptional people from the early, from World War II era were, and losing those people, and life's been so cushy for the rest of us ever since, except for people who have put themselves sort of in the pain cave intentionally. And those tend to be fairly exceptional people that, like, meeting Jimmy and just finding like he's such a mellow and opening, approachable guy, and you kind of view, his accomplishments with such reverence, and to find out he's just like, would share a rollie with you on the back porch kind of deal, and hopefully this thing will create another sort of generation of tough people who don't take things for granted.
Yeah, and that's something that, where President Trump, he never had a formative moment where it was tough. I mean, his hardship was delivering newspapers out of his dad's Cadillac and then collecting rent from the apartments that they owned.
As a slumlord protege.
Yeah.
And then 7 deferments to make sure he could stick around and, womanize and be bigoted and we're on the same page there. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I wrote an op-ed in our local paper and I posted it to social media, and people are like 95% of the people are like, oh, that's great. And then there's a bunch of people that are like, stick to climbing.
That's right. I get so tempted, man, especially after a tequila or two, to rant. Yeah. And I've managed to somehow, for the first time in my life, refrain from that, especially on social media, because I see it and I'm just like, I'm never inspired, at least on that platform, by anything but positivity.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that I've stayed neutral and just have had the platform to introduce subjects who I revere and allow that to just like be the spread of better news and better way to be. And so far, so good.
Positivity. That's what we gotta focus on.
To the end, man.
To the end. Well, thanks, and best to you and yours, and enjoy the day. And we'll I look forward to this coming out, and we'll share it around and we'll have a good conversation.
That sounds good, Conrad.
Right.
Adios, buddy. Until then. Later.